Have you ever woken in the dead of night with that heavy feeling in your chest for no apparent reason? Have you ever been on the verge of a major decision and felt that inner voice whispering that it won't work, that you don't deserve it, that it's better not to even try? I need to tell you something right now. Those are not your thoughts. And there is a teaching that was deliberately erased from history precisely because it gives you the power to silence that voice forever. Today you will discover what was revealed in a sealed room, in darkness, to a select group of disciples, something so threatening to the system of control that 300 years later, an organized purge was launched to destroy every trace of it. It wasn't a prayer, it wasn't a complex ritual, it was a metal. And this metal is capable of creating a field around your body that the Archons, the parasitic entities described in the Gnostic texts of Nag Hammadi, are physically incapable of crossing. Stay until the end of this. Every piece of what I will show you fits into the next, and if you leave in the middle, you will miss the key that activates it all, because it's not enough to know which metal. You need to understand why it works, how to activate it, and why the system made sure you would never know this. Let's start with the reality you were trained not to question. There is a layer of your experience no one taught you to name. You feel it on Monday morning when the alarm goes off and that familiar weight settles in your chest before you even remember a single real problem. You feel it when you're about to cross a significant personal threshold, a difficult conversation, a courageous decision, and out of nowhere comes an inexplicable fatigue, a distraction, an urge to procrastinate. You feel it when you dream of something big for your life and an inner voice, so much like your own, begins to list all the reasons why it's impossible. We've been taught this is human weakness, a lack of faith, a lack of discipline. But the Gnostic texts, the manuscripts found in Nag Hammadi, Egypt in 1945, texts the church tried to completely destroy in the 4th century, describe a completely different mechanism for this experience. Attention, you need to prepare now. I put together an exclusive resource for those who feel set apart for something greater, but live surrounded by noise, distractions, and mental overload. This is a 30-day journey that will transform your life. A guided path to armor your mind and prepare for what's coming with daily practices of focus, boundaries, and discipline. Stop negotiating with the noise. Learn to spot distractions before they control you. And strengthen your mind. Also available in an immersive audio version. Over 10 Zuru readers have already transformed their lives through the 30-day journey. Thousands of people have already started this transformation. People like you who are tired of living in the fog. Ordinary people who decided to stop accepting mental chaos. Take advantage of this limited time offer only this month. Access your link just below in the pinned comment. The Apocryphon of John, one of the most important texts in that collection, presents a cosmology that will unsettle you in the right way. According to this teaching, the material world was not created by the supreme God, the monad, the pure and original consciousness. It was created by a secondary entity called the demiurge, a false creator, who shaped the physical world not to liberate you, but to contain you. And the demiurge does not work alone. He has agents. They are called Archons. Before you dismiss this as mythology, let me show you how these Archons are described in a way that will make you think about your day to day. The Archons, according to the hypostasis of the Archons, another Nag Hammadi text, are not physical creatures with horns and smoke. They exist in frequency, in the space between your thoughts. They cannot create anything on their own because they are derivative secondary entities. But they can feed, and their food is specific. Your densest emotional energy, fear, guilt, shame, confusion, despair. Think about it. If a parasitic entity needed to keep a human producing these emotions consistently, what would it do? It wouldn't appear with horns. It would disguise itself as your own inner voice. It would use your memory against you, bringing up regrets from 15 years ago, the moment you try to act with courage. It would use your love for the people around you to generate guilt where no real guilt exists. It would create false urgencies to drain your energy before you got to what truly matters. Does that resonate with something you've experienced? I'm not saying every difficulty in your life is the fault of an external entity. What I am saying is there is a layer of your experience that goes far beyond the psychological, and the forbidden teachings of early Gnosticism mapped this layer with a disturbing precision long before any modern science. And the teacher knew this, and he revealed the solution. To understand what was revealed, you need to understand who the pneumatics were. This is a Gnostic term describing a specific category of human beings. According to these teachings, not all humans were molded equally. Some carry within them an active divine spark, a direct fragment of the monad, the original consciousness that existed before this world was constructed. These are the pneumatics. The Archons do not attack randomly. They are specifically attracted to pneumatics because the divine spark is exactly the kind of energy they cannot generate on their own. It's like a parasite that is only interested in certain hosts. The more awake your spark, the more of a target you are. And here is the detail that changes everything. The Archons can only feed within a specific range of emotional frequency. Below a certain vibrational threshold, they have free access. But above a certain point, they cannot even perceive you. It's like trying to tune an AM radio to an FM frequency. The signals simply do not meet. The question is, how do you rise above that range of access and stay there? This is where the teachings of the early Gnostic communities come in. And this is where what was revealed comes in. Imagine the scene, a sealed room, no external light. A small group, not the 12 from the canonical narratives, but an even smaller inner circle, people who had already undergone a preliminary initiation. The teacher removes something from near his body and begins to speak about the nature of the Archons with a level of technical detail that does not appear in any of the 4 official Gospels. He describes the feeding mechanism. He describes how the Archons attach to the human energy field through dense emotions. And then he says something no one expected. He says that there exists in the material creation an element that the demiurge could not completely capture, an element that retained a vibrational resonance direct with the monad, with the original frequency that exists before and beyond the architecture of this controlled world. And he names this element. But before I reveal the name to you, I need to show you why this is technically possible, because this isn't just a matter of faith. There is a mechanics here that will impress you. Modern physics has confirmed something the Gnostics described in mystical language 2,000 years ago. Matter is not solid, it is frequency. Every element on the periodic table has a unique vibrational signature, a specific combination of electromagnetic frequencies that defines it. This isn't speculation, it's basic quantum physics. Now comes the part few connect. When 2 frequency fields come into direct contact, they interact. Depending on the relationship between the 2 frequencies, destructive interference can occur, where one cancels the other, or constructive interference, where the 2 amplify each other. The hypostasis of the Archons describes, in symbolic language, how certain materials maintained a vibrational link to the monad, even after the material world was shaped. Most elements were fully integrated into the demiurge's architecture, but a small group, according to the text, retained their original frequency, a vibration the Archons were never designed to withstand because it does not belong to this system. When a pneumatic, someone with the active divine spark, places this material in direct contact with living skin, something happens that is not a metaphor. The 2 frequencies, that of the human spark and the original resonance of the material, enter into constructive interference. They amplify each other. The result is a combined field that operates on a frequency far above the band in which the Archons function. They literally cannot perceive this field, cannot enter it, cannot feed through it. The material becomes a wall, not a physical wall, a vibrational wall, and that material is iron. Let that land for a moment. Not gold, not silver, not clear quartz, not a rare stone that costs a fortune and can only be found in specific places on the planet. Iron, the most abundant element in Earth's core, the most basic, most ancient, most accessible metal that exists. The same metal that runs in your veins, literally in the form of the iron that makes up your blood's hemoglobin. And that is exactly why the system did not want you to know this. If the protective metal were rare, expensive, and hard to obtain, there would be no problem letting the knowledge circulate, because only the privileged would have access. But iron, anyone, anywhere at any economic level can hold a piece of iron in their hand right now. Anyone can wear an iron object against their skin. This made the knowledge universally accessible, and knowledge that makes anyone capable of sealing their own energy field without needing an intermediary is knowledge that completely destroys the system of spiritual control. If you don't need external protection because your own field is sealed, what use is a priest interceding for you? If the Archons cannot reach someone using activated iron, what use is confession? What use are sacraments as purification mechanisms? What use is tithing as payment for spiritual access? It all becomes unnecessary. This wasn't theological heresy. It was an economic and political threat to the most powerful system of the ancient world. And that is why the purge was so systematic. In the 4th century, after the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, an operation began that official history calls doctrinal consolidation. But if you read between the lines of the surviving accounts, what happened was a very specific hunt. Communities in Egypt, particularly in the Nag Hammadi region and along the Nile Valley, were swept away. Communities in Syria, where Gnosticism had deep roots. Communities in Gaul, in modern-day France. The pattern in all of them was the same: confiscation and destruction of iron objects used in energy protection practices, exile or death for those who taught about the Archons and the protection mechanism. The texts were burned, the objects were confiscated and melted down, ironically using iron against itself, transforming it into other artifacts of the system. The people were scattered. But here is what the system did not understand about the nature of this knowledge. You can burn a scroll, you can melt an amulet, but you cannot confiscate a frequency. Knowledge does not reside in objects, it resides in the understanding of the mechanism. And the understanding of the mechanism passed from master to disciple, from generation to generation, through lineages that learned to become invisible. Monks in isolated monasteries who preserved the teaching within seemingly orthodox symbolism. Medieval alchemists who hid Gnostic knowledge within the language of metal transformation. Folk traditions in the Americas, in Africa, in Europe that preserved the protective use of iron without necessarily naming the Archons. And now this knowledge reaches you, not by accident. Let me show you something that will erase any remaining doubt about the universality of this teaching. In cultures that had no contact with each other, independently, iron emerged as the protective element par excellence. And this is impossible to explain culturally. It is only possible to explain vibrationally. In ancient Egypt, iron amulets were placed on mummies, specifically over the heart region, to protect the vital spark during the journey after death. The Egyptians called iron Ba-on-Pet, which literally means bone of the sky, because the most valued iron came from meteorites, fragments that literally fell from beyond the sublunar world, from outside the demiurge's domain. Among the Celtic druids of what is now Ireland and Britain, iron rings were worn specifically on the throat. the energy center of expression and truth, because they believed iron protected the true voice against external influences that distorted it. In ancient Mesopotamia, iron was called the metal of heaven for reasons identical to the Egyptians. The earliest iron objects from the region were meteoric, and they were treated as sacred objects of protection, not as tools. You may have heard of placing a knife or scissors under the bed of someone with the evil eye, or passing a cold knife over the body of a child suffering from a fright. This isn't superstition. It is a fragment of vibrational knowledge far older and far deeper than anyone practicing it today is aware. In traditions of African origin, the Orisha Ogun, Lord of Iron, is specifically the protector of paths, he who opens the way and cuts through blockages. It's no coincidence that iron is Ogun's metal. It is vibrational memory preserved in mythic form. Truth is not cultural, it is physics, it is frequency, and it appears everywhere where humans with a living spark needed to protect themselves from the system around them. But here is where most people make the mistake that invalidates everything. And I need to warn you about this now, because what comes next is what separates those who will truly free themselves from those who will merely feel good about interesting information. Using iron alone is not enough. If simply using any piece of iron were enough, every blacksmith in the world would be protected. Every mechanic, every homemaker with a cast iron skillet, every worker in a steel mill would be automatically shielded. Obviously, that is not the case. Iron has the potential of the original frequency, but potential is not activation. It is like having a battery that hasn't been charged. The structure is there, the capacity is there, but the circuit has not been closed. What closes the circuit is the spark. Remember, I spoke about the pneumatics, those who carry an active divine spark. The activation of iron happens specifically at the interface between the original frequency of the metal and the frequency of the awakened spark. Without an active spark, iron is just iron. With an active spark, iron becomes an amplifier and a shield. This means the first step is not finding the right object. It is awakening what is already inside you. And here is what no one tells you. The spark is already there. It does not need to be placed. It only needs to be recognized. The Archons cannot erase the spark. They can only cover it with layers of dense emotion. Fear upon fear, guilt upon guilt, confusion upon confusion, until you can no longer feel your own light. Awakening the spark is, fundamentally, a process of removal, not addition. How do you do this in practice? Let me give you a process based exactly on Gnostic teachings, but that you can start today, now, with what you already have. The first step is to recognize the archontic voice, not as an enemy you need to fight. Because when you fight it, you produce exactly the dense emotions it feeds on. Recognize it as an external frequency in disguise. When that voice saying you won't succeed arises, instead of believing it or arguing with it, simply observe, this is not me. This frequency does not belong to me. This act of dispassionate observation is what the Gnostics called gnosis, direct knowledge. It is the recognition of the spark, looking at itself and seeing what is not it. The second step is vibrational purification before contact with the iron. The Gnostic texts describe a process that, in modern language, we could call heart coherence. It is inducing a state of genuine elevated emotion before any protection practice. Real gratitude, not the performative gratitude you say because you were taught to say it. The visceral gratitude for something concrete in your life, for breathing, for having made it this far, for being awake enough to be listening to this right now. When you generate this genuine emotion, the frequency of your spark rises above the archontic feeding band. You move out of range, and it is precisely in this state that contact with the iron closes the circuit. The third step is intentional physical contact. Take an iron object, Ideally, one you have chosen specifically for this purpose. It doesn't need to be expensive. It can be a clean nail, a simple iron ring. Hold it or place it against your skin, preferably on your chest, near your heart, or on your throat, at the points ancient traditions identified as most effective. And do this in a state of gratitude, with the clear intention that you are sealing your field, not as a magical ritual dependent on the right words, as an act of recognition that you are a being with a spark and that this metal carries a frequency that is an ally to yours. That is all. It is not complicated, but it needs to be real. It needs to be felt, not just mechanically performed. Here I need to pause and ask you a direct question. Are you feeling resistance while hearing this? A part of you wanting to dismiss this as nonsense, as crazy talk, as something that will make you lose credibility with the rational people in your life? Observe that resistance. Where does it come from? I am not saying all skepticism is archontic. Healthy skepticism is a sign of intelligence and an active spark. But there is a difference between the skepticism that asks and explores and the reflexive impulse to reject before even testing. The Archons have a specific interest in you not testing this, because the real test is simple, free, and depends on no one. And what is simple, free, and independent is the greatest threat to a system that sustains itself on your dependence. I am not asking you to believe. I'm asking you to test. Do this for 7 days. Create an iron object that you wear near your skin with intentionality and with the state of gratitude I described. Observe what happens with your emotions. Observe what happens with that voice of self-sabotage. Observe what happens with the quality of your sleep, with your clarity of decision, with the feeling of the field around your body. And then come back here and tell me what you experienced. Because I need to know, and other people listening need to know. When you share your real experience, you are passing the teaching forward, the same way it survived centuries of persecution, from person to person, from spark to spark. If you haven't yet, subscribe to this channel now. Turn on notifications, because what we are building here is a community of people who have decided to stop accepting the version of reality that was projected to keep them within range of the feeding system. And there is much more content coming that will continue expanding this map. But I still need to give you the final piece, because everything I've told you so far is about protection, and protection is fundamental. But protection without expansion is mere survival. The Gnostic texts do not only describe the defense mechanism against the Archons, they describe what happens when a pneumatic completely seals their field and begins to operate from the pure frequency of their spark, and what they describe is unsettling in terms of power. The Pistis Sophia, another Nag Hammadi text, describes the state that follows liberation from the Archons as a state of operational clarity the text calls knowledge that moves the world. Not in a metaphorical sense, in the sense that when your intention emerges from a frequency that is above the control system, it acts upon reality in a way that intentions generated within the system cannot. Think about it. Every decision you've ever made while in a state of fear, doubt, guilt, low energy, what was the quality of those decisions? And the few decisions you made in that state of absolute clarity, when you knew with your entire being that it was the right thing, how did they unfold? The difference is not intelligence, it is not luck, it is frequency. When you operate from the level of the spark, your decisions carry a vibrational coherence that the material world responds to in ways that seem like coincidence to those who don't understand the mechanism, but are simply physics to those who do. The iron is not the destination, it is the door. It is what keeps you clean enough to operate from the real level of who you are. Let me tell you about a situation many people will recognize immediately, because it illustrates exactly what happens when protection is active and when it is not. Think of someone you know. It could be yourself, who worked hard, honestly, for years, but every time they were about to make a significant leap, something happened, a sudden illness, a fight in a relationship that consumed all their energy at a crucial moment, an unexpected financial problem that appeared just when the opportunity was at hand, a friend bringing disturbing news the day before the most important decision. The life of most people has at least one of these sequences. It is not a lack of competence. It is not just bad luck. It is a pattern, and pattern has a cause. The Gnostic texts describe the Archons as entities that operate specifically at moments of a pneumatic's greatest potential for advancement, because these are the moments of greatest spark production, and therefore the moments of greatest opportunity for harvest. They do not attack when you are already down. They attack when you are about to take flight. Have you noticed this in your life? The protection that activated iron offers is specifically at this interface, at the moment of transition between a state of lesser power and a state of greater power. It is the shield that keeps the field clean precisely when the Archons most want to penetrate it. And here is the practical result for real life. People who establish this protection consistently begin to complete cycles. They begin to arrive on the other side of transitions without the internal saboteur destroying the process at the last minute. Not because the external world changed, because the energy field through which they make decisions and attract circumstances changed. This is real. This is measurable in your own life, and this is what the forbidden teachings promised, not a supernatural miracle, but a restoration of the natural functioning of a being whose spark is free to operate without interference. Before we finish, I need to tell you something about the responsibility that comes with this knowledge. Archontic liberation is not an event. It is a practice. It is a choice you renew daily. The Archons do not give up because you recognize them once. They are frequencies, and frequencies persist as long as they have a signal to connect to. What changes with continuous practice is your ability to not generate the landing signal, to not descend to the frequency where they can land. This requires something our consumerist culture will never sell you: quiet consistency. Not the spectacle of a dramatic transformation. The daily practice, sometimes invisible to the people around you, of maintaining your field, of returning to the state of gratitude when you slip into fear, of using your iron with intention, not as a magical amulet, but as a physical reminder of who you are. The iron object on your body is an anchor. Every time you touch it, it reminds you, I am a pneumatic. I have a spark. I operate from a frequency the system cannot reach. That remembrance, repeated until it becomes identity, is the real transformation. So let's recap what you learned today, not as a summary, but as a map for action. You have lived in a world where a layer of experience, the impulses of self-sabotage, the voice of inadequacy, the weight without cause, has never been satisfactorily explained by conventional psychology or religion. The Gnostic texts of Nag Hammadi, censored by the Church in the 4th century, offer a technical map for this experience. Archons, parasitic frequencies that feed on dense emotions and disguise themselves as your own thought. The teacher, in teachings that never made it into the canonical Gospels, revealed that iron carries an original frequency that resonates with the monad and operates above the archontic feeding band. This knowledge was persecuted specifically because it made the entire system of religious intermediation unnecessary. It survived in traditions around the world, including in forms you have likely encountered without knowing the depth of what you were seeing. The activation of iron is not magic. It is the synchronization between the original frequency of the metal and the awakened spark of the pneumatic, which occurs most effectively when you are in a state of genuine gratitude and clear intention. And the practical attention you need to prepare now. I put together an exclusive resource for those who feel set apart for something greater, but live surrounded by noise, distractions, and mental overload. This is a 30-day journey that will transform your life. A guided path to armor your mind and prepare for what's coming with daily practices of focus, boundaries, and discipline. Stop negotiating with the noise. Learn to spot distractions before they control you, and strengthen your mind. Also available in an immersive audio version. Over 10 Zuzazuru readers have already transformed their lives through the 30-day journey. Thousands of people have already started this transformation. People like you who are tired of living in the fog. Ordinary people who decided to stop accepting mental chaos. Take advantage of this limited time offer only this month. Access your link just below in the pinned comment.